We will be discussing restoration work in the ecologically sensitive Western Himalayas today. The Himalayas, as we know it, are in flux right now. Many things are changing, both environmentally and socially. There's climate change to begin with. Sometimes it doesn't rain. Then when it rains a lot. Geologically, the Himalayas are young mountains and particularly prone to landslides. And then there's a new challenge from forest fires, which is something that the native ecosystems in Himalayas are not really built to withstand. On top of all this are issues of livelihoods and migration and human wildlife conflict. So in light of all this, one may wonder how one is even supposed to go about restoring such a place and make it socially sustainable and get the communities and the forest department on the same page, which in many of our experiences is not something that happens very easily. But luckily, we have two experts from the Himalayan Restoration Project with us today who would be answering some of these questions. So our first speaker is Dr. Sanjay Molur, who is the Executive Director of the Zoo Outreach Organization. He is also the founder and chief editor of the Journal of Threatened Taxa. Dr. Sanjay has about 30 years of experience in various theoretical and practical aspects of conservation and restoration of forests and wetlands along the southern coast of India and in the Himalayas as well. He is also an expert at developing inclusive conservation strategies which bring together principles of conservation and community decision making. He helped start the Himalayan Langur project in 2012 in Chamba, Himachal Pradesh, to understand the behavior, ecology, and distribution of the Chamba Sacred Langur. And at the Himalayan Restoration Project, which he'll be introducing today, he adopts a landscape approach to restoration with emphasis on conserving species, habitats, and livelihoods. Our second speaker is Trisa Bhattacharjee, who is a wildlife conservationist and a perception ecologist. She works as a conservation monitoring and evaluation analyst and advanced training coordinator at the Zoo Outreach Organization. And she is also a doctoral research fellow at the Manipal Academy of Higher Education. She's also a mountain restoration steward at the Global Restoration Forum. And at the Himalayan Restoration Project, she works with the indigenous communities to protect the existing forest cover in the Khajjiar Kalatop Wildlife Sanctuary and create nature-based adaptations. So with this, I would hand it over to you, Dr. Sanjay and Trisa.
Thank you, Nadeep. And thanks, ERA, for inviting us for this session. I hope we can do justice. This is our first presence in this forum, and we might not keep to the time. Don't blame us. If we run way beyond our scheduled time, please, stop us. I'm sure you will do that. You can, perhaps mute us, and that will be better. But I'm hoping that we'll stick to the time and actually have enough time for discussions, because while we have undertaken this task of restoring one small area in the Western Himalaya, the challenges have been quite a bit. So I'd request Trisa to actually present the slides. We have a set of slides that I'd like to take you through and tell the story of what has happened. So basically what I'm going to do is set the background, say how we came about doing this. And then once I finish the background, then Trisa will take on to say what we are doing now, and I'll come back in to sort of fill in the gaps here and there. So what we are doing right now is ecologically restoring landscape, species, and livelihoods. And that's our mantra for anywhere, be it in the Himalaya or be it in the coastal landscapes. But what we are doing here in Chamba is to rewild, to enhance ecology-based climate resilience in the Western Himalaya. And Chamba, being a small district, the northernmost district or the westernmost district within Himachal Pradesh, lies just south of Jammu and Kashmir. The story starts off with way back in 2003, when Zoo Outreach Organization and the primate specialist group and everybody involved in the assessments of primates in South Asia got together in Coimbatore and started assessing about 46 taxa of primates in South Asia. At that point in time, during the workshop, it became very apparent that of all the different taxa that were known at that point in time, this particular one, the Himalayan Grey Langur, was almost data deficient. We didn't know enough about it because the only information we had was the type description from by Pocock in late 1920s, and based on a couple of skins. So the assessment was made based on the habitat or known habitat trends for the species. And the assessment turned out to be endangered. The category turned out to be endangered for the species. They're not very convinced about it because there had been no proper studies done in the type locality of this particular species, which happens to be Chamba. So been working on that for quite some time. And finally, in 2012, we were able to get one of our interns, Martina, who was interning with us for over a year. She wrote up a CLP project and got funding for this particular project to work in the Himalayan landscape in Chamba. So she brought on board two others, Tariq Ahmed from Jammu and Kashmir, and Vishal Ahuja, a localite from Chamba. So between the three of them, they established quite a bit of basic understanding of the species distribution and the negative interactions it had with people and everything else, including understanding how different the Chamba langurs themselves were from the neighboring langurs like the Hector and Schistaceous, because although recent genetic work shows that they might all be one single species, there are distinct taxonomical differences, behavioral differences, and morphological differences between each of these different species that we know of. For want of anything better right now, we've kept the Chamba Sacred Langur as a unique taxon for the region, for the valley of Chamba, extending up to Kishtwar in Jammu and Kashmir. So it's been a 12-year-long journey with the three of them having started it off and then continued for about 3 years. But by the end of the 3 years, it was Vishal Ahuja, who was a localite, in whom we had built a lot of capacity to take on. And he worked steadily ever since and has done so much for his community and has done so much within the landscape that we've been able to get a lot of information based on the initial studies and follow-up studies that Vishal has been conducting, along with other volunteers and interns who've gone from Zoo Outreach or who come from various other parts of the world. So we now know that apart from the Chamba Sacred Langur, which has come into some negative interaction with people due to crop raiding, the rhesus macaques and black bears also have the same issue with people. The negative interaction zones are more than 77 within the region. Although there are 53 villages that Vishal, who you see in this picture on the right, has interviewed for perceptions and for other studies. We know that people are quite tolerant towards langurs, not as tolerant towards macaques, and definitely not tolerant towards black bears. So what we've done is to use or make use of the species of which people are quite tolerant, and that is the Chamba Sacred Langur, as the species to build bridges. Gola, as it is popularly known within Chamba and in the Chambiali language, is a very important aspect of their tradition. Gola is thought to be a sacred species for them. And so the name that was coined by Douglas Brandon Jones about 10, 12 years back was Chamba Sacred Langur, which we use because that also brings in the pride for people. So as part of this study, Vishal went out to collect information on the dietary requirements of the Chamba Sacred Langur. Being a botanist himself, he has quite a bit of information and knowledge, rather, on the species distribution within the region. He has till now documented 35 native plant species that are preferred by the Chamba Sacred Langur, of which 21 were published earlier, and 14 additional information that we have received over the last couple of years since the first publication. We know that there are many more species that the langur is dependent on, and so we're waiting to collect a lot more before we publish the additional information. But Vishal has gone on to document the native and non-native species within the Chamba Valley, within Khajjiar Kalatop Wildlife Sanctuary and the adjoining landscape, the fragmented forests. So he's prepared a herbaria of 257 species belonging to 77 families, which is quite a bit, and it keeps adding on because every time he goes into the field at different time of the year, he comes across species with different phenologies and therefore is able to identify more of them, and they keep adding on. And so that's a wonderful herbarium collection that we have, and thanks to Vishal, it's going on. So all of this happened for 8-9 years, and during COVID, there was obviously a dip in everything because everybody went into their own silos. However, because there was not much to do then and nothing else to sort of go about, we thought we would take a pilot study of what it would take to start working with the communities, not directly interact with them, but because of our perception studies, we knew that some of them were tolerant, and we knew that some of them were also suffering from, most of them were suffering from problems with agriculture because of crop raiding and everything else, and the complexities of the climate crisis. We realized that quite a few of them were willing to work with us on restoring their own lands. Many of the families that during the surveys we realized had given up agriculture as their livelihoods, as their main form of livelihood, because of the negative interactions, because of the crop raiding, and because of untimely rains and the effects of climate crisis. And so many of the youngsters had moved on to suburban and urban areas, and many of the older generations only stayed on, farming only a small part of their lands. So a lot of their lands was left vacant, and they wanted to experiment with us in terms of restoring parts of the lands that they were not using. And so we picked up 4 farms, people who came forward. When Vishal pushed this idea to people, 4 of them came up and gave their farms for restoration. So we were able to plant about 3 native species, about 500 saplings in these 4 farms, very small areas, to first of all understand whether the way we were doing this was right or not, and whether it would succeed, and just experimental, just to see if we would succeed. Through those 2 years, we learned that we fared very badly in terms of the success of those saplings. One is that some of them died because of overwintering problems. Many of them, however, were attacked by livestock because of nomads. And this is one issue that we had to deal with, very strongly. And that's something that we learned by documenting the movement of nomads across the valley, which is something, again, that's still going on, but we still do not have a good idea of how they move around because they don't have a fixed path. However, the villagers came forward and said that, this is a good idea. And when we went back in 2022 to reach out to more people, to reach out to women self-help groups and everything else, and everybody else within the landscape, the stakeholders, the forest department. Anyway, we were working with all of them. Vishal was doing that, but we actually reached out to them through educational outreach programs and everything else. We had 2 months of success meeting with several different groups and establishing very good contacts with Vishal at the forefront and all of us sort of supporting him in what he was doing. And this happened in May. In July, we got a letter from one of the panchayat chiefs who said that 4 panchayats, 7 wards, 28 villages, 500 plus families, and 2,000 plus individuals have come forward to participate and partner with Zoo Outreach Organization in restoration of over 800 hectares of their land. And this came as a complete surprise and utter shock to us because this is we were not expecting this scale of success at that point in time. And all this, mind you, without any promises to the people, no expectations, no compensation, no incentives, nothing. And they said that they wanted to do this because they knew, based on what was happening to them from the interactions, from the climate crisis, and from what we'd been sort of engaging with them over the last 12 years, they said that, we now understand what you guys are saying, and we now want to work with you to ensure that we have a better future. And so that's why they came forward with this. So having done that, we were wondering how to go about this. So this is 28 villages, some of them bordering the Khajjiar Kalatop Wildlife Sanctuary. That's a huge area, but we had to start somewhere. And we started off with the project. And the project, which started off on March 21st, on World Forestry Day this year, is where I'm going to leave this and let Trisa continue with what's happened this year. We'll come back to this at a later stage, and then if you have more questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, so this is where the Himalayan Restoration Project starts, and it's a journey from Himalayan. So you can't differentiate basically between Himalayan Langur Project and Himalayan Restoration Project because both of them are intertwined, and both of it is working towards bringing positive impact towards the landscape, species, and people living there. So on the rightmost, this is the team right now. Payal is missing here. So there's Sanjay, Vishal, me, Kritika and Amreen. They are working with us. Kritika works on majorly understanding langur distribution, apart from helping in the nursery and understanding what's their diet. And Amreen is trying to understand the human black bear interaction. And Payal, she helps us with the education programs. And yeah. So as Sanjay mentioned, 21st March 2024, we officially launched the Himalayan Restoration Project with the buy-in from the communities from 28 villages, which is 2,000 plus individuals, and the government school in Khajjiar called the Rando Higher Secondary School. So we came together to celebrate the official launch. Now, this official launch is actually a very big thing for us because, as Sanjay was mentioning, this is a landscape where people are losing out on their economy. The economy is falling, and human-animal negative interaction is only adding to it. And these people have actually come to us and given us parts of their farmable lands to convert into native forests, which is And the entire thing has happened only by education and outreach. So this shows that how they have understood the importance of forest to mitigate climate change, to mitigate the economic crisis they are having, and all the other associated issues. So since then, we have been interacting with the communities. Now that we know they support us, we are going to them, we are conducting more and more perception studies, we are doing forest dependence surveys, and like these are the stats right now, and the team there is doing like every month we are reaching out to more and more villages. And during these studies or surveys, what another thing we also do is we interact with these people and we bounce off the idea of restoration with the women and what they feel of it, what are their solutions. And majorly it has happened that they are like, yeah, I think that restoration is what we want, because they themselves have no other solution. They have tried and tested everything else. They have tried deterrents, they have tried fences, they have tried everything, but nothing has helped them yet. So they are with us. And another win we have is the nursery. So we have till now germinated 12 native species of approximately 5,000 saplings, including walnuts, prunus, pomegranate, pear, horse chestnut, and a few more. And we are, and this pre-monsoon, we will be restoring. We will start with our restoration with the school students in the region and also with the communities, and across the few farms that we have figured out with the people. So even the restoration that we will be doing this year is the areas where communities have told that they will be taking care of the saplings. Most of the areas are such, except a few where there are the nomads moving around, and thus we have to have other protections. But other places, the women or the men or these youngsters, they have come ahead and they have told us that we will take care of the saplings. And I think the fact that we include them for the restoration project also creates a sense of ownership among them, that they are growing it in their farms. So it is their area of land to protect. So that has been helping us in a way. And there are a few threatened species as well that we are dealing with, like Taxus wallichiana, Lilium polyphyllum, Berberis, and Aconitum. And so I think Sanjay would like to.
Yeah, so what we have here is, these species have been recorded in the Khajjiar Kalatop Wildlife Sanctuary. In fact, I've been fortunate to see, 3 of them, Berberis, Aconitum, and Lilium. The last time I was there in March earlier this year, which is great, because the Khajjiar Kalatop is just a very small protected area in in nearly about 3,000 odd square kilometers of agricultural landscape. The sanctuary itself was about 70 square kilometers, which over the last couple of decades has shrunk to 17 square kilometers because of rezoning. But what we are doing is to look at the eco-sensitive zones around the sanctuary to start looking at this restoration. Having said that, apart from musk deer that is found, and the Himalayan marten, the black bear, Chamba Sacred Langur, leopard, and other species that are native to the region of mammals, we also have these 4 threatened plants. What we are trying to do is to understand how non-native species are actually taking over the landscape. We know that across the landscape, wherever there's farmland, where the by the roadside, we get only invasive species everywhere. But we can see more and more of those invasive species invading into the Khajjiar Wildlife Sanctuary also. So our interest is, while we are doing restoration, we also want to understand the distribution and the impacts of non-native invasive species on the native species. And so one of our objectives during this is to, while we build up the restoration part for the community, we also want to get the community, some of the women and the youth trained in natural history, especially in being able to distinguish native and non-native plants, so that we can do a combined community study to understand how non-native species are impacting native species. And this we would like for them to understand fully while they are in the field, so that they also come up with scientific solutions to this particular problem. But understanding how non-native species are impacting native species is an integral aspect of conservation. And while it is documenting, the documentation will help us develop a conservation plan so that we can go about doing that. Without documentation, you can't do anything else. And so we've had our challenges in convincing a lot of funding agencies in actually to tell them that we need funding for such important documentation, because unless we involve communities in documenting, and unless we know how non-native species are already threatened native species, we'll not be able to move forward with conserving these threatened species. But that's another a challenge that we need to mitigate because of the funding agencies' understanding of what conservation is all about. And this is something that I'd like to reiterate later on when we talk about challenges. But I just wanted to sort of plug this in here in that context, because when we talk further, I'll be referring to this.
And another thing, like here, this slide gives an idea about the species that are endangered or threatened or critically endangered, and the list we have. But there are a lot of other species that are not even assessed yet. And that's a major concern, because until and unless we document the information about those species and get them assessed under the IUCN Red List, we even won't know what's happening to the species that are not assessed, and we lose out a lot of them even before that happens. And a lot of the species that are endangered also are not only trees, they are herbs and shrubs, where another funding challenge comes, where at times it gets very difficult to convince agencies that we want to grow shrubs or herbs in that landscape, where there are dominant tree species found and oaks and all these other important species found. So these herbs lose their importance among all the other important tree species. So, like Sanjay was saying, we are communicating with the women self-help groups in the region. We are training them in natural history, in nursery management, and we are trying to involve them in our restoration activities. And right now we are in the process of taking a few people or women and youth helping us out in the nursery. So the women self-help groups are our major strength at this point, because if we can convince these people, it's very easy for us to get into these villages and start off with our restoration. Because I think most of the times when we go for these meetings, it is when they say, okay, we have a piece of land there, you can just carry out plantation. We have some land that we will take care of if you just do the plantation for us. So this actually, it's an open space where all of us have the equal opportunity to talk. And there are people from the region, there are women who are interested. And in all these meetings, we find a few, one or two women who are very, very enthusiastic towards the plantation processes. And they are the ones who carry on the entire meeting and convince everyone. So another part of our project is also to find out local ambassadors. So in this picture, like here, I don't know if you can see, that's Pooja. So she is one of the people we started our pilot studies with in her farms, and she has been very helpful, and she has helped us in convincing the rest of the women and villagers in the space by having plants in her own farm and telling them, see, I have it, and the interactions in my farm has reduced after the native forest comes up. Though we had a few challenges with our pilot studies due to the changes in rainfall pattern and the snowing time and all. But still, these few people, or the ambassadors as we call them, are a great help for us to unite the entire villages together. And then we have the students. And so this is Pooja here. And we had a session with the school students in Khajjiar, and it was an eye-opener talking to them, because all of these people have stayed for so long in these regions, but some of them, they don't even know yet what are the native plants in their region, what are the trees that they should find in their region. Like, a common idea is to have apples, and it so this gives us some perspective that like, what do we need to do to educate these students, so that when they go back home, they know how to tell their parents that, okay, we need to plant the right trees and we need to save the right trees and not plant the other ones. And the challenges, I think the first biggest challenge that we face is funding. Though we have been lucky, right now we are supported by Global Landscape Forum and American Association for Zookeepers and Mercedes-Benz. But I think funding is something every year it's a new challenge, that some year you have money, some year you don't have money. And Vishal himself is a Mud on Boots fellow. And there have been years where we didn't have money for Chamba project. I think last year was a year where we had no money for the project, but we have carried on. We have had interns, we had staff who were working full time in Chamba, and that's one of the challenges. Another is the change in the climate pattern, because usually the change in rain timing has been affecting the saplings that we are planting in the region, because sometimes the rain doesn't come, the saplings die, sometimes, because again, we can't expect the people to water the plants in these spaces, because they don't have such, first of all, they don't have such economic capacity to do that. And secondly, in those regions, it's very difficult to manage fields of restored plots of land that are spread all across the landscape. Then another threat that we have been facing is the human-animal negative interactions. So sometimes what happens is, when we propose the idea of restoration to these people, they feel that bringing back the forest means bringing back the animals, like the number of animals will increase more. So, and since the forest area has reduced and the animal crop breeding has increased, people nowadays have started to feel that the animals are increasing in the landscape, which is not the scenario. Another challenge is forest department, at times getting saplings from them, because our native plant nursery is still at the toddler phase, and we are still working very hard to make the existing saplings plantable. And at that time, there are no other nurseries in the region, so we have to depend on forest department for the saplings for meeting our yearly goals. So at times it becomes a problem. And I think Sanjay.
Yeah, I mean, I think Trisha said it all. So challenges are plenty, which conservation does not have challenges. So, I mean, this is something that we have taken in our stride, and as she rightly said, that we have tried to overcome this with whatever facilities and opportunities we have in our organization to do this. But unless the project is taken on with proper funding, it would actually become very difficult for us to even give back the trust that the community has placed in us. And this is where we need to actually make a move forward. So they have placed their trust. Now we need to show them that we can do this by helping them out in their landscape. So this is what we have as of now. We'll talk more if you have questions. And I see some questions on the chat. Divya, we are trying to. No, the herbarium is not digital yet. That's something that we need to do. We want to do it once we get some things going and we get some funding for that. We will definitely make it digital and definitely open source, like all our publications. So Arjun, how do you want to take this forward? Are there questions that you'll ask us,
Sure.
or?
Yeah, I think thank you so much, Sanjay and Trisha, for sharing about your experience. And it's just fantastic to see that, it's while you say that that your restoration project started only in March 2024, it also seems like there was so much background work that has happened that has actually made this project possible now. And there's a lot of kind of goodwill and incentive from the communities that you've been engaging with. So it was really nice to kind of have this overview of what all has actually happened that made this possible, as well as the different kinds of ways that you're engaging with the community to take this restoration work forward. I think what we can do to start with. So first of all, thank you so much for this. And how we can do is we can take up the questions from the chat. If people can also type them in or maybe unmute and ask, we can take it like that. And there are a few other questions that it would be really nice to go over. So I think I'll just open the chat and see from there. Meanwhile, while we get to the chat, Trisha, you mentioned in the middle that you've been doing perception studies and forest dependent surveys. I'm very curious about how does that feed into the restoration work, and what exactly do you uncover in the forest dependent surveys that also helps you plan the restoration work as you go forward?
Do you want to say?
Yeah. So, majorly for the perception studies in all of our projects in Zurich, we make sure that we have the perception studies done beforehand, before we start any project. So we majorly try to understand what people feel about restoration as an idea in the region, and also what they feel about animals which they are dealing with, and what is the overall attitude of people living there. Because we don't want to force the idea of restoration. We want it to be something that comes automatically or organically for them. So if we see in places where people, there are people who have felt like, if you bring, why do you want to bring back more forest? Why can't you just bring apple fields? Okay, we will help you if there are apple fields. We want, what is our benefit if you bring back the native forest? So in those regions, then we don't start restoration directly. We rather go through a process of education and outreach, where we spend time with them. We keep on going with them for 2 months, 3 months, as long as it takes, to explain them why we are doing it. And we try to address questions like, why do you think the climate has changed? What was the region? How did it look earlier? Okay, if the forests were earlier, were the animals more? They will be like, no. Then we are like, why do you think the animals are coming? They will say there's no food. So then we are like, okay, so if you get the food, will the animals come anymore? So it's a continuous session of questions and answers and explaining them, and none of that is where we are enforcing them that, okay, no, animals have reduced. No, it's just that we keep on bombarding them with the similar kinds of questions that they know. And then after a point, they are like, oh, okay, right, yeah, that means restoration will help us. So the perception studies actually help us to understand in what stage which village is, and can we right away start restoration? Does that region needs education and outreach, or whether that region is too much, they are very much negative, they have very negative mindsets, and right now we don't want to focus on that, but we will come back after a point there, and we will get along the other regions and give them examples so that they can learn from and they can understand that. And forest dependency surveys are majorly where, so this is something we started last year, because when we were going for our surveys also, and even now, there are a few people who feel like firewood extraction is there. But also, other than that, there are people who are like, okay, if you plant the tree, we will give them a list of the native trees we are planting. So most of them, again, they want walnuts. They're like, okay, because it's again economically better crop. So it helps us to understand that what are people feeling about the plants that we are going to restore at the same time. Because we don't want people to have a notion that we are planting the trees today, so tomorrow you can just take away the trees. No. So the plantations, before that, there is a sessions happen where we tell them that no, it is for the forest is for the wildlife, and the wildlife stops coming into your farms. So the farms are for you, and you can continue agriculture in the rest of the region, but the forest you have to keep back for the animal. So yeah, but I think that is a continuous challenge and continuous struggle. It's one negative interaction will happen, one bad season, one bear attack or something, and you're like, okay, I have to go back to the village, and 5 years down, more 5 years of work increase. So yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And very much related to that, there's another question on the chat which Sanjana brings up. Is saying, hi, I was just wondering, how do you assuage the concerns of animal interactions increasing after restoration? As in, how would you explain to them and how and why and that the how and why of the interaction will actually decrease? So this kind of a
Yeah, it's a tricky question, and just like anything else that we do in ecology nowadays, it's a double-edged sword, because of the perceptions people have. The thing is that we've already done something that is negative in the landscape, which is what we're trying to now, work with the people to see how best we can set it right for themselves and for the species. The point is, the species that you see, especially the langurs, the black bears, have nowhere to go. Their areas of feed have decreased so much that they opportunistically seek out crops and raid them. So one of the only ways to sort of deal with it is to provide them with their native diet. And the native diet comes from the study that Vishal has conducted. So we have 35 species. So what we are doing now is to identify 10 or 12 species of those 35 species to begin with as our first phase. And so that is what we're growing in the nursery to start planting. And then we will increase that number and eventually not keep it to just those 35. Eventually, a lot more species will be propagated. But the point is that if our understanding from similar works and from experimental studies from around the world, we understand that restoration actually brings down negative interactions between humans and wildlife, rather than increase them, because there is a lot more opportunities for wildlife to survive on their native diets rather than sugar rich or high nutritive crops, which may or may not be conducive for their health. So yes, I mean it's still a work in progress in this landscape, but based on other available information, we feel that this might work.
Thanks, Sanjay, for that. And I think, tying into how you've been working with the communities for so long, Manoj brings up this question. He says that, working with communities took a lot of time to show, and it took them some time to show confidence, approximately 8 years in your case, right? And, but given the current situation where things do seem more urgent than, where you have the time to kind of act, build things slowly, uh, what would be like some ideas or ways that you can deal with communities in this way? Or do you, or how would you kind of take something forward like that? He says that he is from the Himalayas, and yeah, for him, I think he's also trying to assess how to go about with this process. So any advice or any other recommendations from you?
You want to take that on? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so yeah, it's again, like I said, no situation is comes on a platter. Everything is so tricky. Everything has to be tried out before we can even understand whether it works or not. Yes, the point of having to wait for so long before something picks up, before it can actually start making a difference, is the reason why a lot of, less than preferable, alternatives have been incorporated. One of them being the cheer pine that is introduced into the landscape as a reforestation species or to avoid landslides. But cheer pine not being native to the landscape, also with very high alkaloid contents and highly inflammable, is causing a huge amount of forest fire in a landscape that rarely had any forest fires earlier. So, that's one of the issues that, yes, we can select species that are fast growing. We can select species that are conducive to the requirements of humans because of what they perceive. But in the long term, or even in the medium term, it's actually, it hampers the ecological integrity of the entire place, and people will suffer even more than what they are suffering. So we need to somehow work with the communities, work with their behaviors. Perhaps it is, upon us to bring about that behavioral change in them by engaging them with what is happening. And this is very true with our experience here, with our experience in Rameshwaram and Kanyakumari with the fisher folk. As you involve them in the studies that you're doing, they'll come forward with the alternatives. We don't have to actually suggest anything. They themselves will come with wonderful solutions to the problem. And if they come up with those solutions, we know that they will not backtrack, and they will know how long to wait, what to expect, and what are the challenges that they have to face in the meantime. So we're working with communities is the way to go.
And just adding in, also, if don't, I understand the question where it's like, there are landscapes in India, and especially in Himalayas, where we have to, the urgency is the need of we have to work, we have to start working, and you can't, because the communities are not at all agreeing to work with you. But I think it's very important to have them on board, and till you don't have them on board, it's useless, because even if you go ahead, you do restoration, they will destroy your plots. They will, why would they care for you who's someone who has come from outside, and even if you're from the region, who is working there on their space without having their involvement or without having their permission? It's very we understand the urgency, they don't, and we wouldn't accept that in our own spaces. So I think we have to respect people who are in their space, and we have to have them on board, and it's on us to educate them. So yeah, and sometimes it may take 8 years. Yeah.
Or more.
Or more. Yeah, considering that you are still continuing in certain spaces and trying to get more and more people to agree and participate in this program, so definitely or more. I think just adding on out here, another question that's come up in the chat is more around. So Priyanka asked this question. She says, after the first failure in studying the native plantation, how did you finally come up with this success with the native trees, and how much time did that take for you to pivot into this model that is currently working for you?
Like I said, we don't have a working model yet. We are getting there. The point is that we tried out in 2021, 22, we tried out as pilot studies. We did that as experimental plots just to understand what the challenges are. From that we realized that many of the saplings were impacted by livestock grazing, especially by the nomads. They just go in swarms. Just imagine hundreds, thousands of them just going, of goat, sheep, and mostly goat and sheep, and they just eat anything that comes their way. So these saplings just don't stand a chance. So we realized that, okay, if that is the one that is, to be tackled, and if we protect the saplings from marauding livestock, then the success rate will be high. And yes, I mean, there are instances where we have seen where people themselves have planted a few native species here and there around their farms, and they have done quite well. So we do know that the success rate of those saplings are quite high. But our experimentation has been just for about 2-3 years now, which is not a good enough time for us to understand. However, what we've understood are the threats and how to deal with those threats. So the only way we can go about some of these plots and start restoring some of these plots is by using plant protectors for a few years until the saplings grow up. That's the only thing, because even though the communities have come forward and they say that they will monitor, the nomads can go through their farm with 1,000 livestock heads, just eating up everything. 1 or 2 people will not be able to stop that. So we still have to be careful about it.
Thank you for that, Sanjay. I think somebody had actually just on the chat also asked about how exactly do you protect these saplings? So maybe plant protectors, as you call them right now, is the answer to that question. And another person then went on to ask, I think Nitin was asking, how do you track the survival of the saplings and impact that it has? I mean, how do you track the survival of these saplings and impact of these? Are there proper metrics to measure the tangible impacts of these projects? So could you elaborate a little bit more on the evaluation measures that you are looking at for the restoration projects and how you go forward with that?
You want to take it up? Or, okay. So like I said, from the experiments, we understood where we failed. So now we hope that with the plantation that we're going to start this, in a couple of weeks now, we'll have our first plots to actually monitor. And with the participation of the local communities and the farmers who've given their lands, I think we will be doing that. We've also, looked at monitoring the germination rates in the nursery. So we have quite a good idea of the percentage of mortalities in the young saplings, and the seeds not germinating properly and all that. So we have that data that we are accumulating over the last 2 years. Now, once we start with this first set of plantations, about 1,000 individuals from of 7 different species that we're thinking of right now, in this month, we will start monitoring them to see how best we can answer the same question, perhaps in 3 to 4 years.
Thank you, Sanjay. I think just going down this path of when you talk about monitoring is one thing, and you briefly touched upon in your presentation about some of the challenges in terms of financing these kind of projects and what that means. But Arushi Kaushal just asks also, while we know some of these challenges in terms of finances and convincing the community, what are the gaps in policy or infrastructure support that you might have come across in your project at the moment?
Yeah. So one of the challenges again is the experts, finding experts to help with this project in terms of, say, plant experts. While Vishal is a plant expert, we need more of them, and we need people who will stay on for the long time. In this day and age of people jumping jobs so often, to hold on to people is really difficult. So that's been one of our biggest challenges. Also, somebody to upkeep the nursery. We have 2 members from the local community, Shakti and one of his village mates, who are taking care of the nursery full time now. And they know what to do with with germination techniques and everything else. So we need more people like that who will then expand the nursery. We've got a very small plot. Again, it's on one of the farmers' land who's generously given us that piece of land to develop the nursery. We need to increase it. So scaling up is our next goal, which we'll start doing from next year. So for which we need more people to work on the nursery. So those are the 2 things.
And from the forest department or the government side, I think getting the saplings, as I was mentioning, because I guess forest department, they also have their own targets to achieve, and I think every time a forest officer changes, we are like, oh, okay, like you don't know what's going to happen. So because every year when the reports come out, like what will be the next objectives or the targets for that state, what all plants do they want to plant, how much funding is there with the government itself. So all these processes also affect. And yeah. But right now we are very lucky with the forest officers, we should say. Like we have some people who are definitely into native plants and wildlife, and it's better right now.
There's another, I think Sarayu is asking this just on these lines. I think you brought up this issue also of we need to have some kind of resources for people to stick on with these projects, manage the nurseries, and actually commit in some way to the landscape as well, right? But I think a source of funding in this, and Sarayu was asking, is that are you trying to use MNREGA for labor as a funding source? Is that something you've approached?
Yes, actually so. Because this was actually proposed by the village panchayat, the Pradhan, who gave us in writing that 28 villages are willing. So he said that we will actually get MNREGA to do some of the work for you. So he said, from that point of view, once we get the project going, we'll be able to buy in that. So when we go to Chamba next, I intend to meet with the commissioner, with the people in the government, so that the Pradhan, Vishal, and we all sort of represent the project and try and build up some support from there. We have the support of the Chief Conservator of Forests from the Himachal Pradesh Forest Department. So he's also willing to speak on our behalf. So we are hoping to move forward with that.
And again, another thing with MNREGA, as far as I know, is the projects have to be very large scale. So this year till now, we were just at a phase where we were handling with 5,000 saplings in the nursery, and we need to have funding at the first place to have so many saplings as well, for where we have as many jobs for people, because 5,000 saplings is not compared to the broader scheme of things, it's not a huge number. So we are also at the same time, while Sanjay is pushing for the policy stuff and these admin related stuff, we are also trying to push where we can have funds to have the saplings at the first place itself and nourish them in our nursery, have a bigger space. And I think again, there is a lot of background thing that is needed before we again come out with MNREGA and have large scale plantations happening.
Thanks, Trisha. Thanks, Trisha, for that. Sarayu, do you want to unmute and actually share your thoughts? Because I think it'll be nice to hear what you also have to say about MNREGA.
Yeah, hi. But first of all, congratulations. You guys are real brave hearts and green brave hearts, so to speak, and so proud of what you're doing. We're doing something similar on Western Ghats in Nashik. So we too started just about 2 years back, but our strategy is slightly different. We are working a lot on commons. Okay, so 90% of what we're doing is on Gram Panchayat land and on Forest Department land. And this year we've started a little bit, on private, land. So I just wanted to give you all, inputs on NREGA. So NREGA is excellent, a great tool. It'll shave off easily 25 to 30% of your costs on labor. Okay. NREGA works on common land as well as on private land. You can use NREGA for almost anything under the sun. I can actually share, a document which says 266 different kinds of work that can be done under NREGA, even from making wells to making bunds to digging pits for saplings, to planting the saplings, to even taking care of the saplings for 3 years. Okay, NREGA supports. So I'll share a document. I'll give it to Arjun, and Arjun, maybe you can circulate it later to everyone. And I think all of us just must make a whole lot of use of NREGA. what we have done actually in Nashik is we have signed up an MOU with the Zilla Parishad of Nashik that we can use NREGA, anywhere in the district. Not that it is really, it's good because the donors like such documents, but on ground level, what you are doing is perfectly right. It starts with the Sarpanch and the Gram Sevak. Okay, you need a lot of buy-in from the Gram Sabha and, the Sarpanch. And, they will tell you like it has to be done only on 2nd October and stuff like that. Nothing like that. It can be done any time of the year. They can always start supplementary projects and get going. So please use NREGA, make full use of it. It will really save you a lot of cost. Okay, so
Thank you so much for this information. Please share the document with us, and we'll push forward. And if you don't mind us contacting you,
most certainly, I'll
more information on this. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Having said that, and I'd like to also draw your attention to the fact that we have restored 70 acres of land just outside of Coimbatore. That's Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, and that project is 30 years old. So from a completely barren land to now, with 275 plus native species, it's a changed landscape. So that's something I invite you to come over, and when you come to for whatever reasons, make sure that you also visit the Nilgiri Biosphere Nature Park.
Yes, will do. Yeah. Next time you are there, you let me know. I will come when you are there.
Sure, please. Yeah.
I really like the way you involve the local communities, because I truly believe that's the only way it will make the project sustainable. So what happened was we didn't realize this. We were doing it for the first time, so we thought we'll get the technical stuff right first. So one of the things that we are doing is, which is slightly different, is we are actually conserving the grasses. Okay, so what we do is when we start, we first take a Gram Sabha. And now suppose, so because as I said, we are working a lot on commons, and you are also lucky that you're getting a lot of land that is coming up, from the private, farmers. So the first thing we have to do is protect the grasses. Okay. And when we protect, then we actually employ people, on our roles to protect. But if you have such great, fabulous community engagement, let them take turns at, making sure that their grasses are protected. And that is more than half your job done, because the moment you protect the grasses, succession starts almost immediately. And, the insects will come, and then the insect population grows, and then the birds come in, the bird population grows, and from their droppings, you have seeds, and, they start taking off, and succession comes out. It's amazing how it happens, So literally, without lifting your finger, a lot can be done by just protection. And just then you have to fill in the gaps, and of course, I always keep saying that, and all of us know that, succession, it'll need about 15-20 years by the time, you have a dense forest in that place, if it is properly protected. And we don't have that luxury of time because of climate change. And so it needs a little bit of intervention. But we found that also please include watershed management techniques. Okay. Building small, loose boulder structures, small check dams, very small trenches and stuff like that. You will find a lot of water getting conserved because of that. And it will add a huge, impetus to, your efforts, huge impetus. We found that, and you have to do this, in the catchment area, so on the hilly areas. And you will find that at least we were really fortunate. In under 8 months, the water in the wells in the, lower down, the water levels came up. So wells that used to dry out by Jan are now lasting till May. So that was a real great thing. So please include watershed management techniques.
Absolutely. No, one advantage we have in Himachal Pradesh is that there is a lot of terrace farming. And so already the, much of the civil work or water management is already done. So we need to just, use that available structure to our advantage. So thanks a lot for that. Yes.
But protect your grasses, please.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really protect. It'll just do magic. Much more than you can imagine. We're just allowing the earth's natural rejuvenation processes to kick in. So, and another small point I had made on your saplings, don't depend so much on forests, because they also have their own needs. start creating your own nurseries from seed that we've collected. In fact, somebody objected, why are you collecting seeds? But, it's such degraded landscape. You don't have a, choice, but, to adopt such, just, and we collect a very small percentage, maybe 0.001% of the entire seed mass. So we collected almost like 20 lakh seeds, and we made lots of nurseries. Some of them we made seed balls, and, we kind of dispersed them. Some of them we just disperse the seeds, So what happens is the forests are so degraded that natural dispersal is not taking place. So, it needs a little bit of intervention to help that out. Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for
Thank
your,
you.
for your advice and everything else. So we'll come back to you with more.
Yeah, folks like us should keep exchanging notes, because I learned a lot from you on, the way you, engage with the community is beautiful. Yeah. And how, they're taking ownership. And I think you really hit the, right chord. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Sarayu. Yeah.
Fingers crossed, hoping that it'll work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, Sarayu, you brought up this question of ecological succession, and I think Akhilesh had a similar question on this, that I'll just read it out from the chat. So he said that, how did you determine the sequence of succession species for your project? And what were the key ecological factors guiding these decisions? And, how did you decide, how did you think about primary or late succession species?
Is this a question for us or?
Yes,
sorry.
that's a question for you, Sanjay.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, no, our entire focus has been on, restoring with native food species for the langurs and the black bears and the macaques. So we want to start off with that, and we'll see how it goes from there. And I think these are the things that we need to start incorporating as in when we go about doing this. So there are, I don't have answers for some of these questions, but I am willing to sort of, take it on board and, work on it. And again, I encourage whoever it is who's asked this question to please, perhaps work with us and help us to, carry this forward.
Thank you so much for that, Sanjay. And I think one other aspect that somebody had raised up, had actually brought up, was the idea of, sorry, I'm just going back to the question. It was around invasive species. No? So you said that that there is a lot of invasive species that are present in that area. Are there any specific approaches that you've already started to kind of work on removing these invasive species, or what is your approach around invasive species in this area?
Yeah, one thing we've learned from various different examples and things that we've done in different parts of the country is just removing invasive species make very little impact. I think removing them has to be, immediately followed up with restoration of native species. So unless we have our, native stock in hand, removing invasive species does really very little. It just adds more to, the angst of seeing, more invasives come back.
Thank you. And I think on the lines, because you also brought up this project that you have worked on in near Coimbatore in the Nilgiri biosphere. Somebody had asked on the chat was, is there any advice that you can give for urban restoration kind of projects? Is that something that you can also share about?
Where do I even begin? I think we'll need another session on that. I've just started doing this, and in fact, in this morning, I just had a 1 hour long session with a couple of organizations in Bangalore, and I'm helping them do this. So yeah, I'm just taking that on board in terms of working with different organizations to set certain basic things going. So I think it's too broad a question for me to answer right now. Maybe we can, address it some other time.
Oh, definitely. So yeah, I think with that, are there any, I'm just opening it out to everyone else again, that if there are any other questions that they would really like to be addressed, if they could put that in the chat. Yes, so I think there was this one question that I missed out, and this is from Sayed. He asks, how are you selecting the area for restoration? I think some amount you covered in terms of, working with the communities to identify who's more receptive and who's not. But Sayed, I'm not sure what ARR projects, can it come under ARR projects? I'm not sure of what that is. So could you help us clarify what that is? If you could unmute and ask directly, that would be great.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, Sayed, we can hear you.
Yeah, hi, thank you. So, sir, it's actually I'm going through your presentation. It was actually so nice to get to know of the project that you guys have done. Even your work in Nilgiris was actually so fantabulous. So, I work in a project company is called IRA Ecological Solution. So, we work with organizations and forest departments, and we have restored almost 100 lakhs of hectares of land across India and abroad as well. And we work in carbon-based solutions. And I think so most of these projects that you are doing, which is actually goes in restoration of, barren land and the band which is actually need restoration. So one of those areas is basically, I think, so carbon market. And since you guys are already working in plantations, so we are working with organizations which are already planting and working with organizations who are using people in and around the village. So one of the projects that we are working in Meghalaya are restoration and agroforestry models, where we use local species and local people, where they can benefit from the organizations and the money that helps them to come to the level that they can have an additional source of livelihood. And plus these afforestation also help in water and sustainability and for afforestation. So I think so these are the projects that we can actually put our different organizations get together for fundings and understanding how we can help each other.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Syed. I think we need all the help we can get. So yes, I mean, if you don't mind, we'll reach out to you. Is there any way we can have a connect, Arjun, with Sarayu and with Syed and others, who have shown interest in?
Of course, I'll be happy to make the introductions. And anyway, after this call, we'll be sending. If you're comfortable with it, we can also just share your email ID with everyone, so they can reach out to you for further information, and be able to connect with you as well. Of course, and I'll take a note of, I'll make sure I do the introductions with Syed and Sarayu and the others who kind of shown interest. Yeah, I think even Raj Mohan had pointed something out similar in his chat so Raj Mohan had mentioned that he would also be happy to fund some of the pilots that you're doing, but I think in Uttarakhand he mentioned. But I think you can also have a conversation with him as well as we go forward. Yeah. So considering this, yeah, Syed has also shared his email ID on the chat, and so has Sarayu. So we'll note them down as well. Yeah. Thank you, Syed, for that. Dhruvata asks, is it possible to join the project as an intern or a volunteer? So
most welcome.
Open?
Yes. Yeah? Yes. Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. We encourage as many youngsters to, and people interested. I mean, not just youngsters, anybody interested to join the project. So you're most welcome.
And I think
send us a, I think we'll just put our, where is, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm technologically challenged here, so I leave it to the youngster here to sort of, put in my email ID.
Okay. And I think, yeah, there are many people who are writing and saying that how can we join the project and so on. So I think you have a lot of people reaching out to you, right? And I think one question that also got missed was around fire lines and how you manage fire, if that is a situation that you come across very often in your project, specifically in that area. And I think that's That's the only question that I think we have not covered yet.
Yeah,
So-
I think there was some question about cheer pine being a native and all that. And
Yes,
I
yes.
just want to address that question. Actually, cheer pine is not
Yeah.
native to the region. Other species, there are two other species that are native to that region. The cheer pine is actually comes from Pakistan and from what is that? From around Islamabad, the Murray Hills. Okay, cheer pine is actually native to that. However, it's been brought here. The problem is that the leaves the pines that drop are highly inflammable, and they form a mat on the ground and do not allow any other species to grow. And because they are highly inflammable, any accidental fire, makes the entire landscape go, up in flames. But more recently, because they do not allow grasses to grow, the locals themselves fire the needles. And so forest fires is both accidental and locals actually resorting to burning the pine needles to clear the land for grasses to grow, for grazing. So there are a lot of complex issues there with that. So we need to somehow work. I mean, and most of these are on forest land. So we need to work with the forest department to see how best we can deal with it.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. So I think with that, I think there are some other questions on species selection, and we've kind of addressed that in some way. And hopefully now we'll have Sarayu maybe join us in another webinar as well to share about her experience in her work as well. Right? But at this moment, I would like to really thank you and Trisa for taking out the time and sharing with us about your work. And thank you so much for engaging with everyone, with all the participants, and really addressing all these questions that came across. And it was just wonderful to have you here today. Thank you. Yeah. And thank you to all the participants as well who joined in and gave so much time for this webinar. So thank you all.
Well, I think we benefited so much more in terms of sharing this experience with you, and from hearing back from all of you. I think this is a great format, and this is a great platform. Thanks, Arjun. Thanks, Mandeep. I think it's fantastic. Yeah, we're all excited about ERA. Yes. Thanks again.
Thank you.